What's going on, you beautiful fuzzballs? In this video, we got to sit down with the CEO of Swarm, Yannick Meisen. And let me tell you, after talking with him, I'm more bullish than ever about Swarm AI. So glad I grabbed 10 of these licenses nodes. If you want the short info about those licenses nodes, that video up above there will give you the short skinny. Otherwise, everything's down below, the links in case you want to grab a license after watching this and you feel as bullish as me. Otherwise, enjoy the video. I know it's a long one, so I did put chapters down below in case you want to skip around about some different sections. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. We got Yannick here, who is the CEO of Swarm. We're going to be talking about some questions here. And a number of these questions, actually most of these questions, I'll be honest, Mrs. Wookie wrote up. She listened to some of the previous AMAs, and she also was pretty excited that Joe Rogan's like your favorite podcast.
Nice.
She definitely enjoys that as well. So definitely have, dropped some videos for my community about Swarm, at least about the nodes and the roll-up news kind of portion and stuff. But some of
Yeah.
the questions we definitely wanted to, kind of grab you while you're here is, first off, just simply what kind of encouraged you to, quote, uncover the truth?
Yeah, man. It's just, I mean, like we can go really, really deep um into my personal history, but I always felt like there was some kind of like movement against society or against honest people from, let's say, like a high, sometimes institutional or corporate level. That's actually one of the reasons. That's not one of the like reasons at that point in time that I really understood it back then. But I left Holland to go to Southeast Asia when I was like 18. It was really early, but I had this feeling that I wanted to get away from the system, which I just could see become like a beast essentially. And I've been through some experiences personally where it was very apparent that the cards were not really stacked in my favor. They were stacked against me. And then when I saw all of the stuff happening in the US, especially during the election, where there was just so much polarization and there was so much like us versus them going on, and people are taking like certain things completely out of context. And, like I'm not a US citizen, so I shouldn't even be bothered by that, like hypothetically speaking. But obviously, the US is a big power and actually very important to the world peace in a certain manner. But I just saw that then kind of like extrapolating into the rest of the world. Like we saw like these situations in the United Kingdom where people are literally going to prison because they're posting something on social media, on Facebook and so on. And all of that information I saw being heavily suppressed, and I was like, like we need a system that is able to help us to identify what's true and what's not true, but then also anchor those discoveries into something immutable, so later we can come back and we can see, hey, how did this narrative or how did this story that was pushed upon us like start, where did it go, how did it change over time? And like there's a lot of things like that. For example, like you can see this on CNN and BBC, like they have posted articles during the COVID pandemic. And then now if you go back in history and you look at, like the edits that have been made over time to this article, they're changing their arguments.
Yeah.
It was really like very strongly opinionated. And then, as more evidence came out and more research came out, they had to come back and really revise their statements because they fucking knew that they would get into big legal trouble. So, and then that was one of the big aha moments for me where I was like, okay, that's not okay. Like, that's really not okay. And we should have a system for that. Yeah. And then I guess another thing which contributed to that as well is the movement towards citizens journalism just recently as well, where it's like, okay, everybody's a journalist and everybody can speak their mind, and that was already possible, but now everybody's being encouraged to basically kind of like be more factual. But you see people misuse and abuse that a lot. So yeah, there was just no tool out there, man. It's like, how are you going to fact check it? Like, go to Google and then read everything yourself. It's like there was no go-to thing, right? So I was like, yeah, like we have this crazy framework that we can build swarms with, but now what are we going to build? Like what is something that is really, really, really useful? Like what should we actually build? And that was just the first thing that I was like, okay, that should be it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and yeah, being in the U.S., there's definitely yeah, like you said, that the polarization, and it's almost got a point where people, don't care about the truth or the facts. They just want to hear
Yeah.
and hear their kind of echo chamber over and over and over, instead of just I jokingly a lot honestly say a lot of times that I feel like I'm like one of the last reasonable people around. But I don't think that's the truth. I think it's just that far ends of spectrums just get so much publicity and focus on things
Yeah.
too that you forget there's a lot of reasonable people out there. But yeah, I definitely love the way Rollup News is already functioning. So I'm definitely excited to kind of see everything kind of building on it. Now, I had never used the SUI network previously at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can tell me a little bit about why SUI network is good. I mean, obviously I can look CoinMarketCap. It's like a top 7 coin, on blockchain.
Yeah.
But me personally, I just hadn't ever really used it before.
Yeah. So I have a few personal opinions, but our dev team has more technically sound opinions. Like from the technical perspective, it's very fast. You have these objects, right? So essentially, before a block is finalized, like a transaction can show up theoretically. So this gives it an edge, like even if in the future there would be more people really building on top of SUI, and the transaction volumes will be like, let's say 1,000x from here, that chain will still persist, and that chain will still perform very well. Then additionally, from my perspective, it's a very undervalued ecosystem because, like, okay, you got all the volumes on Solana, you got all the volumes on Base. You have a chain that has a TVL, which is equivalent, that's in the top, right, to the other big ecosystem players. But on a project level, there's not much going on yet. So that means that there's a gap there. Like, and that gap is gonna, sooner or later, that gap is gonna be filled, I believe. So we'll probably be seeing a migration from some of the volumes from Solana, like probably onto Base, and then you can already see that happening. And then from Base, eventually they have to go somewhere else, or maybe it's just like directly from Solana to SUI. But yeah, I see that there's like a huge potential there. And then if you are established, and if you're there, if you are the early adopter of a network, and you're a project that actually has a nice product out there, like sooner or later an asset out there, the main asset, and then we'll have a couple of swarm assets out there. And then we have the infrastructure for people to build and launch their own swarms, also the assets, the underlying assets. Then that's just going to become like a go-to option once the people start coming. And I think it's much better to be positioned in that fashion, opposed to saying, okay, let's go and PvP with all the other projects that are building on Solana, because it's like millions of them, right? Like the
Right.
majority is just like a bunch of meme coins. But still, it's like think about mindshare. Like, how are you going to capture mindshare in an ecosystem that's overcrowded? It's like either you need to spend a lot of money, which is an option, or you really need to have a very superior product. But then again, like, you have a superior product, somebody's going to come around and they're like just going to carbon copy it and name it differently, and then that's how it's diluted. So if you look at, like, I was just doing some analysis on the AI agent space, you see like the number of agent is one line, and then the total combined market cap. The more agents there are, the lower the market cap is going, because it's just too diluted,
Right.
and people don't know where to put their money, and like there's no central point of focus. People lose interest, people get rocked, there's a lot of grifting going on, and then like the interest in that segment starts to decline. And that's purely because there's no utility there at the moment,
Right.
right? All of these
Right.
AI agents are just memes.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would agree that a lot of these like AI projects that are out there are basically might as well be meme coins. I mean, you see
Yeah.
them and they literally have nothing to show for it, which is one thing I
Yeah.
loved, with Swarm is like, hey, I can already show you guys this first AI agent, and this is already running smoothly, beautifully. The way the page gets loaded, like I like the layout of everything. I think it was very easy to use, and so
Yeah.
definitely excited to see the rest of the stuff kind of come down the line here. How long you been working with your team? Because I know a couple of them had worked at Delysium, I think, with you, right, as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, with some of them, I've been working for a few years already, like 3 years. Some of them, it's been 2 years. And then we have a few new people on board as well, more on the development side, on the dev side. But yeah, so we got the our CTO Morty. He's really a stellar guy. Previously, he was with RCT AI. Previously, he was with Delysium as well. One of the co-founders of Delysium and RCT AI also came over with us. And then we have another very strong co-founder who is also in charge of Zero Stage, who is a very large incubator in Dubai, and they've invested in projects. They've invested in incubated projects like Polygon, and I think Near as well. And we just have a super strong team that we have pre-existing relationships with, and we have done a lot of work with in the past, not just on Delysium, but also on other projects on the advisory side and so on. And yeah, we hit the ground running, man. It was just like from day one we were like, okay, here's the spectrum, here's the direction that we're going to build in. We put our heads together and we looked at what we had in our suitcase. Essentially, it's like what was there already, like was pre-existing technology that we were either developing or that we had co-developed already. How can we combine those elements together, and where do we think the future is gonna go? So we did this exercise of like, let's try and look 5 years in the future, let's like try into 10 years in the future, and let's try and look 30 years in the future. So based off that, we developed our strategies. And then we were, once we reached consensus internally, we were like, okay, let's now just go and build, according to our vision. And yeah, I'm super blessed, man. It's like, it's so good to have good people around you that you can rely on, instead of having to go through the cycle of like hiring and like trying to get people, and then you get people and then you need to make them happy, and then you need to retain them, and then you have this like churn all the time, which some companies have. Like for us, it's really different because we have a relatively small team, but the team is so tight. It's so like everybody is so close. I believe that it really says something, like if one guy leaves the company, that then all of a sudden, like 10 other employees are just like by themselves without any pressure saying like, hey, oh, if you're leaving, we're leaving too. Like, and just don't worry about us, but if you're going to do something else, please let us know because we want to join. Like that just says something about the tightness and the mentality of the team.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of rolling into that, my assumption is you left Elysium to do this project just because of focus or what you wanted to build. Is my assumption. I don't know if you're able to speak on that at all or not.
Yeah, I'm pretty open. I know there's a lot of people talking about this, and everybody has opinions. And I was getting DMs, and I was getting texts just recently. Like people just dream up a lot of stuff, but what it really was, it was just I was not able to do what I wanted to do. It was very simple. I'm a very visionary person. I kind of know what I wanted to do. I knew we would be capable of doing it, but there was no support in going a direction that I wanted to go and my colleagues wanted to go. And there was some internal conflict eventually, which kind of like lit. It was just like, it was just a bucket, and the bucket was already full, and then there was just a couple of more cups of water on top of it, and we had to make a decision. Or I had to personally make a decision, and that decision was very obvious to me. I was like, okay, well, I know what I'm capable of. I know that I'm not here for financial reasons, because if I quit now, I don't have to work. I can just retire and chill. But that's not my desire. What my desire is to build something that people can actually use,
Yeah,
and like and do it in a very rapid fashion. Not build something for 3 years and then release it and then realize, oh, like, maybe it's not that great. Maybe it's a bit shitty. Like we need to build something else. What I want to do is I want to build something in 2 weeks, bring it to market, like with our core community. We got this alpha group. I think you're in it as well. And then like riff with people to see like, okay, so here's the base of the thing that we're building. You can envision the future by yourself, but what would you actually like to use it for? How would you actually like to use this thing, and like how would you see it develop in the future, and how do you think it's going to find its place within this world? And then you got 1,000 people who are invested in you and who are like seriously considering, you know, like the function of this application that you're building, and then you get real-time feedback. And if you build based off of that, I can guarantee you that you will get like that first 10,000 to 100,000 customers almost guaranteed, because you're actually building what people want to use.
Yeah, I love so much of what you just said there in that scheme. You know, people know I've been a part of some other, you know, projects and stuff, and been pretty deep into some, you know, groups here in the crypto space that I saw like at least, you know, what I envisioned them doing, and then them
Hmm.
just taking a complete left turn and then a right turn and then another right turn, and I are like, where are we and where are we going? You know,
Yeah,
like you and your community had a certain vision, and then you have broken off from your community to do whatever I guess you decided now, even though your community is in here, you know, giving you feedback
yeah,
over and over and over. I mean, I've seen so many projects
yeah,
like that. And the other thing I love too is you mentioning that you know, this is something you want to do, you know, like this isn't, you're not in here because of XYZ. And I've been talking to the Mrs. Wookie here too, and how I'm like, you know, if crypto can get me to a point where I don't feel like I have to do this like web 2 9 to 5 job.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, we're going to be doing traveling. I mean, I know folks
yeah,
that you know, volunteer time in like Vietnam. So I am a doctor, right? And I would love
yeah,
to be able to not work as a doctor to make money as a doctor, but to be able to
yeah,
go to Vietnam, train residents for 5 weeks, you know, train those physicians and like really make them better,
yeah,
right? Have like a positive impact on the world. Like those are the sort
yeah,
of things, right, that are in your heart, you know. But too often
yeah,
people in the back of their heads are like, well, I got to make more money and more money and more money so I can
yeah,
achieve whatever dream people have. But for me, my to achieve my dream is going to be is pretty attainable. Like I don't have
yeah,
high desires of, you know, whatever yachts, jets, cars. Like I don't care, you know.
yeah,
A little bit of land, nice little home, right? Some peace. Like
yeah,
that'd be a nice little thing to have, and then be able to do everything else with your life, you know.
yeah. It's like, you know, like the level of comfort for people differs, obviously, but I
Right.
believe that people that are super rich and they need the yachts and they need the airplanes, while they're sitting in their airplane, they're not comfortable. They're not happy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you have to go to that extent to try and satisfy your desire through materialistic acquisitions, it's like you're not in tune, man. Like you're not
Yeah.
in touch.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you're not in touch. I don't need a Lamborghini. I don't need like a villa which has 40 rooms and only me and the wife living there. It's
Yeah.
like what is it for? You know, like I always have this feeling, and now that I actually building in the direction of like more collective intelligence and so on, I really see this very clearly. Like we are always optimizing for the whole, for the bigger let's say framework that we're in. So if you're married, you have your wife, maybe you have kids, you're optimizing for this. But then that construct, your family, is part of a community, and you want to be comfortable in your community. Like once you have your personal affairs settled and you're really happy, okay, then you're gonna start to look at the community. It's like, okay, well, what can we improve here? And then from community you go like even bigger, maybe whatever, like you can even like take it out of context from family into business, where you have your community and you're always optimizing for the benefit of all of your community members, not your personal benefit, because optimizing for their benefit means optimizing for your benefit, and together you're going to become bigger. It's not like, oh, I'm going to extract as much value as possible from these
Right.
from these dumbasses and so on. It's like, no, like you'll run yourself into the ground really quickly. So ultimately you should be focused on the things that are going to benefit society. And that's why I'm also very against these like AI agent memes, because you're just, sorry if I don't know if swearing here is okay, but you're just a fucking open AI rapper that is LARPing as innovation. You're not innovation. You're not innovating anything. You're just having an AI agent with like one or two function calls hooked up to the Twitter API with a profile picture.
Yeah. Just slapping a name on it, you know.
Yeah, it's like, but how are you going to contribute to society? Yeah, maybe in the short run, some people are really like 1% of the people that are invested, they're going to make money. But on the back of that, 80% of the, like 99% of the others that are going to come in later because they're not as well educated on the space, like you're going to fuck them up. Like they're going to they're gonna lose their like wages, like like they're gonna lose last month's wage. They're gonna not be able to make payments for their car or some shit like that. You really want to be in that game? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't want to be in that game.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So back to Swarm, how does Swarm's, I guess, protocol protect against like data manipulation or misinformation?
Yeah. So the way it works on a very fundamental level is you focus or you leverage the immutability factor of the blockchain, right? So there are claims. So those claims, they are propagated from information. So you always use a source. So that source right now is, so for example, somebody saying something on Twitter. So I just rolled up a thread from Tom Rand, who's I think the guy's a lawyer. He was talking about like the Doge and his perspective on that policy centerpiece, which is the government efficiency agency thingy from Elon Musk, right? And he's breaking it down, and he's reviewing this document that was published by he's reviewing the executive order that's published, and then he's analyzing everything, and then he's looking at, okay, well, actually it's not a new government agency. It was actually an agency that already existed. It was created by Obama, and that was then renamed to Doge. And there's some claims and some statements. He makes a claim, for example, that was like a guaranteed route to funding. So, okay, well, you got all of this information, all of these claims there from you don't know who. Like, I've never heard of this guy. He might be a lawyer, but lawyers doesn't mean that they're always right, right? So it's his personal, like, subjective
Sure.
opinion on this piece. So then I roll it up. What happens is all of the information is essentially propagated by a team of agents. So in the swarm, this initial agent swarm that is powering the truth protocol, there's 100 agents. All of those agents, they're sub-organized into subgroups, subdivided into subgroups that all have a very specific function. So the first group is responsible for extracting um, the claims. So you have all of this information. A lot of it is redundant, but what you want to get is like, what can I verify? And then the next team of agents is then gonna review those claims and see if there's a smaller unit of a claim that can be extracted from the claim that's presented. So sometimes you have a claim which is a little bit ambiguous and it might be a little bit subjective. So you will probably want to break it down into 2 or 3 constituents or separate claims for the verification process. Then you have a swarm that does the research, then you have a swarm that is going to evaluate the research and score it and tag it and like basically map it to the database, which is an on-chain ledger. And then eventually there's a consensus forming going on where all the individual agents that part of the swarm, they individually participate in the review from their perspective into whether the information is sufficient to verify or falsify a claim. If the claim cannot be verified or falsified, it's unsubstantiated. And then eventually that's propagated and pushed on chain. So then you have like the finality of a claim, the state of that claim is then put on chain. And if that is, for example, unsubstantiated, then you can build a business logic on top of that. Let's say we have an unsubstantiated claim because that's a claim that is going to be able to be verified in the future. We call that a prediction market, right? So now we can build a prediction market on top of this infrastructure. Or you could trigger certain, let's say, smart contract or purchase actions on certain assets that you are planning to purchase based off a change in policy or based off of the verification of a claim, or like, okay, maybe now there's like, let's say, okay, the claim that XRP is being charged by the SEC is true right now, and then eventually now we saw like a few weeks ago that they dropped the charges, right? Or they
Right.
won the case or
Right.
something like that. So if the state of that claim changes, I can now build a trigger on top of that that says buy XRP, right? So now you can build business logic, like smart contract logic, on top of what the agents are verifying in real time all the time, based off the status of a claim, and you can then start to bake this into like different like different action spaces of other agents, or maybe just personally, like you want to be up to date based off whatever is going to change in the future, or yeah. So like you can look at it from many different perspectives. A lot of people think it's just purely informational, but actually it's not. It's also financial. Like the markets that we're playing, the markets that we are engaged in, for example, let's say the stock market, that's not just a game of numbers and facts. It's a game of speculation. You can see like DeepSeek news comes out, right? And like the whole market crashes. So
Yeah.
those are very important events, right? Those are very important events, but those events are not on chain. They're like, there's no, okay, you have optimistic rollups or optimistic oracles, like UMA, for example. But the problem with optimistic is like, it's optimistic. So you assume your predisposition is that everybody is telling the truth all the time. But that's an incorrect, that's an incorrect, um, um, that's an incorrect position to start the inquisitive journey into truth from, because you cannot assume that everybody is telling the truth, even if they own a large large sum of the supply and they're really engaged in the verification of claims or the refuting of claims. So to make it understandable for people, is how UMA, for example, works is, I am able to submit a claim, and if nobody says or can prove that that claim is incorrect or not true, then it's automatically going to be issued as true, for example. So there was like some issues with this. There was like some prediction market last year on Polymarket where they had to like roll back essentially because UMA ruled a market concluded in a certain way. But like if you would be a reasonable and rational person, you would understand that that was not the case. And then they actually had to roll back, and there was like this big fiasco. So that's the problem that you have if there's no, like the way that you actually need to treat claims is like, you're guilty until you've proven otherwise, right? If you're the one that is going to claim something from a scientific perspective, you are actually the one that's supposed to be providing the supportive material to verify what you're saying is true, right? It's like, okay, like if you're in a court case and you're being charged based off you being somewhere at a certain time, and you for a fact know that you were not, you're going to be the one that's providing the evidence to show the judge that you were not at that place at that time, right? If you claim it and you cannot prove it, okay, we shall assume that you're not telling the truth.
Hmm. So, my assumption is there's no human input during at least this portion, like when the agents are functioning. It's
Yeah,
all just the dev side, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Right now it's all the dev side, but on the second version it's going to become more dynamic for the user side as well, because we also understand that you cannot fully rely on AI right now.
Right.
Like it's like there's going to be like contextual, cultural nuances that my agent doesn't understand, because an agent, we have to really be really honest with ourselves. An agent, an AI agent, whether it's a multimodal agent, whether it's attached to a spot or whatever crazy robot you can think of, it does not have the same world model as we humans have, and it will never have. It's like, it's very different. The way that these things operate and process very different. They seem to be much more rational in certain aspects, and they seem to be much more efficient in the propagation of information, but they also don't understand a lot of things about the world that we do understand, right? Or maybe that we think we understand, but they don't know. Like even we think we understand a certain thing about the world, but it actually doesn't work like that. But everybody just assumes it works like that. That's a shared reality, right?
Right.
So the world model there is really important. So therefore we also understand that if we really want to be able to make this system like as robust as possible, there needs to be a symbiotic relationship between AI and humans. Like there has to be human input. So what we're allowing people to do eventually is, especially for unsubstantiated claims, and this is also what's going to create an economy, either you can spin up your own agents and your own swarms to join the process, or you can become some kind of like a verifier where you actually come in and you review and you find mistakes or you find evidence to refute or to substantiate claims that are still unsubstantiated, and you can actually earn from that as well. So I think that's going to be a very important aspect of like the at least the Rollup Swarm, like the truth protocol to develop. But that being said, like the framework for building these agents is not confined to just like the truth protocol and what we're building, but like
Right.
you can build whatever you want with it. But yeah, again, like I hope that people will just focus on the utility side of things.
Yeah. And at least, for now, I mean, the AI agents are free. The Rollup News is like free to use at the moment. My
Yeah.
assumption is that people are building their own AI agents, they can kind of, I guess, take it a different direction, or have fees if it's some kind of predictive market AI.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's indeed important to build like economic models around it, right? It's like, where's the revenue generation? Where's the value generation? Like, and I think that's something interesting, for example, for the agent builder and like the swarms, it's going to be really simple because it's just, okay, like who is doing the inferencing, who is doing the service calling, who's producing the input, who's producing the output. So you have very, very clear counterparties. But for something like Rollup News, actually you want to make it kind of like seemingly free for the user, but then you want to have like some core participation of like probably some, like some, like companies or institutions, or maybe you want to have bounties and sponsorships for uncovering information and so on. Like this is like the
Right.
model that we're playing with. So yeah, it also depends on how the users are using the platform, right? So more often than not, I see people envision a platform like, oh, it's going to work like this. And then, like people are going to use it for something completely different. It's very funny, actually.
Yeah, yeah. That would be pretty cool bounty wise. And what I mean by that is it'd be really interesting if it's like some kind of news thing comes out and then right it's like, hey, does anybody have any video evidence or
Yeah,
whatever? And somebody's able to
exactly.
post like, whatever video of the Black Hawk hitting the airliner. And so they got a bounty
Exactly.
because they brought forth a piece of truth, I guess you could call it, or whatever. That'd be a really interesting aspect. Right now,
Yes.
I know it's on Twitter. Is it going to be expanded to anything else, like I guess Facebook or Medium articles or something like that?
Yeah. So I have two approaches for this currently, and this was actually a suggestions by the community as well. One member, he DM'd me and he said like, hey, I think it should be like a plugin that you can just have on your browser, where it's like an Edge or like a Chrome plugin, and you can essentially just take like a snapshot of whatever website you're on or whatever source you're on. So like whether it's on Facebook or whether it's on like YouTube, and it would automatically like take either the link or yeah, probably just take the link, and then maybe on our backend the API integrations would be readily there, or it would just be like literally just like a HTML copy of the site, and we do it that way. It doesn't really matter how. But that was an interesting idea because then you can, like we can have it essentially anywhere. Another way was that we integrated like more natively, like what we did with Telegram, like we actually have like the bots on the social media platforms and so on, because that's really good for the marketing, right? Because like I can show you later if we still have a bit of time. Like I just rolled up this thing, and then when I make a comment, the comment gets like a few thousand impressions and a few thousand views, right? So like that's a compounding thing. The more users you have, the more exposure you get. So that's how I see and envision this thing growing on Twitter. And then another idea was that you can just like copy any link and just post the link on Rollup. You can just go to the homepage and you can take, for example, like an article from wherever, like a blog post or maybe like some legacy media, and you can just put it in there, and then like the Rollup will be created based off the link you provide. I think that's also an option, but definitely it's gonna be multiple entry points because the fundamental framework and structure it doesn't change, right? Because you have source material and the propagation, and everything is essentially works exactly the same, and because it's all based off like the analysis of the source material, whether it's picture or whether it's a YouTube video, it all gets converted into the same format and then checked. So it can be anywhere essentially.
Yeah. It'd be interesting too if, like, with that extension, it was even a almost like a scam prevention, or helped you prevent scams, where
Yeah.
you go to a site and it pops up and it's like, I don't know, whatever it says, people have reported this as a scam site, or this site is very similar in name to this site that most people actually go to,
Yeah.
or something like that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and you know what, another really interesting thing is, it's actually also by one of our kind of like advisor and friends, and he was like, yo, you know what you should do? Like, if you, so we're categorizing and we're tagging all the sources, and we're creating reputation scores for them. You cannot see them right now, but they're being generated. And on the next version, you'll be able to click on a source, and then the source page opens up, and then you will see all the claims related to the source and how many of those are substantiated, unsubstantiated, or falsified. Um, so you'll have a pretty good reputation score, because like obviously the more fake news, right?
right,
Like
right, right.
the worse the score would be. But then to actually also um, show the ownership of said source or said network, let's say like CNN. Okay, who are the main stakeholders in CNN? And then from the main stakeholders in CNN, what are they talking about? Like, what's true about them? Like, what else do they own, right? So you can create like a web of like interest essentially, and you can kind of like map out. You can map out on a mathematical level even. It's like, okay, you know, like these people, they have interest in this, and they can influence the outcome of certain events through these and these and these vehicles. So that's something that we were playing with as well. And I think, you know, like on a high level, that's important. It becomes very, you know, like kind of like you know, people have started to call me like like anarchaic or some shit like that. But I think that's a little bit extreme. That's a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just exposing, you know, like the relationship between things. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
It's really
and
interesting.
conflicts of interest, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
on the medical side, I mean, I I can't take a crap as a doctor without like putting some kind of conflict of interest statement on a freaking, anything I talk about, even though the US government has made sure, like, I can't get a freaking dime, from any pharmaceutical
Yeah.
company, but they can get paid by pharmaceutical
Yeah.
companies all day to
Exactly.
lobby and make laws. But me as a doctor, man, heaven forbid I mention the word Tylenol, and it's like, oh, have you been
Yes.
paid by Tylenol to, it's like, come on,
Yes.
so it's
Yes.
pretty wild. um so the node sale launch. Well, how far out are we so far? We're gonna be out about 2 weeks here from the node sale. We got about 3,000 of those licenses sold.
Yeah.
How are you feeling so far about the node sale?
Pretty good. Like like we didn't really go too hard into like the promotion side of things, and like really shilling it um to the max, because I think that it's much more important to build a core community and have that community to benefit from it. So it's pretty natural, man. It's like it's relatively natural. It's going at its pace. I think we'll be able to hit the targets that we set out internally before the launch, definitely. But I just want to make it a net positive for everybody.
Right.
And you know, like you saw the day that we launched, man, it was a bloodbath in the market. And then again, like a few
Yeah.
days ago, like the market was really not good. Like the memes are having liquidity problems. Like the Trump token was essentially like just soaking up all of the liquidity on
Yeah.
Solana and
Yeah.
so on. So I thought it was gonna be much worse actually, but it's doing very well. Yeah, I'm very happy with the results. And um I yeah, like there's sort of feedback from the community too when we launched. Some people said it's like the launch was smoother than an otter dipped in Vaseline, and we had so many compliments about like the launch, because it was, you know, like we were very prepared. Everything was already finished. I was
Yeah.
ready like a week in advance. And yeah, I mean, like that's how it's supposed to be, you know.
Yeah, no, it was crazy smooth, and definitely my community, they love it when it's the way it is, because because they were here day one with me. They've already earned like so much, token, being able to be early on, um
Yes.
and I think we'll continue to see, kind of growth. And with everything you've said, you're just making me more bullish, while I'm here, wanting to just kind of keep doubling down on this, because of just the utility and the drive that you have for all this. So I'm definitely really excited. Um, I guess maybe some of the questions for node holders will be, what are they able to kind of, I guess, provide in the future, with the licenses and stuff. I kind of touched a little bit on like the agent Buidl,
Yep.
and kind of some of the stuff that will be open. But even me, I don't quite understand everything, so I'm just kind of waiting for the platform to go live later, and then I'm gonna mess around with it, of course.
Yeah. So we're focusing on reducing the barrier to entry into not just the AI agent space, but especially in the swarm creation and management and ownership space. So we have this principle, which is basically own, operate, and earn. So you can, first of all, you can own a swarm and the agents within it. You can operate it, so you can define its mission, its vision. You can define like where is it going to operate, whom is it going to operate for. Is it going to join the truth protocol? Is it going to do something else? And then you can earn from that, right? So there's also a marketplace element to it. But the way it's going to roll out is pretty clear at this point, which is first is going to be agent Buidl, where you can actually not only build agents in a very simple fashion, but also orchestrate them into a swarm. And it's kind of like a sandbox. You can play around with it, and then you can find good configurations. You can run it, and it can become this utility-driven thing. And then once you're ready, like once you actually have figured out like, okay, do we have a real business model here, or am I just going to use it for myself? If there's a real business model, then do I want to launch an asset for it? And then if you wish, you can actually launch an asset for that swarm. So you can create its own unique token. And that token you can then distribute among whatever, like whether it's just going to depends on the purpose of the token, obviously, if it's going to be for governance or if it's going to be just a distribution among maybe your community or something like that, right? You could co-own a swarm together. You could then use swarm token to create a liquidity pool, and you could have a certain, like similar to like this bonding curve, but not as aggressive. And you can then get your community involved or get people on the platform involved into your swarm, and then the ownership would be more distributed, so you'd have to also have this governance process into iterating the swarm and making decision on behalf of the swarm. But it becomes this distributed thing, right? It's like, okay, now I have a really cool use case, really cool swarm, but I want to stay close to the ethos of decentralization and blockchain. So I want to distribute its ownership, and I want the community to build with me alongside. I want to like have the community to build alongside you. So that's something which I'm really excited about, and I think that's gonna become one of the main value drivers behind the main asset as well, because people will have to get the assets from the open market to be able to operate and join your swarm. And then probably the most exciting thing about that is that you'll, by default, by being an agent license holder, you'll get some access to the upside of whatever is being launched on our platform. So that's going to be in the form of airdrops, but also in the form of revenue sharing. So there's going to be a service fee for every single asset and every single swarm that is launched and operates on the platform. And that pool then will be redistributed every time there's a launch to the agent license holder. So yeah, so the design kind of like format that we have in mind is like, okay, there's going to be people that are going to be able to build these things, and there's people that are going to be able to own these things, right? That's a really different thing. Like owning a thing and like defining its vision and mission is a very niche thing, but then building the thing is also a very niche thing. So we wanted to make sure that whatever kind of user you are, whatever kind of investor you are, you have outs, you have options, you have options to capitalize on the opportunity, essentially.
Right, right. Yeah, there's been, as I've told my community, there's lots of different ways that you guys have built in some kind of, revenue profitability, depending on how much they want to do versus, even just flipping the licenses later for the
Yep.
2.5% OG fee structure. Um,
Yeah.
so this community, or this question comes from my community. Asked them if they had a couple questions. One was, how do they plan to advertise and market Swarm? And it kind of goes along with the other question of, how do you see Swarm kind of being adopted?
Yeah. It's a very good question, and I don't really have answer that's like super set in stone, but I have principles that we go off. The first principle is that we have to decrease the barrier for entry into actually building these agents. So what I mean by that is now it's mainly a game that is owned by developers. Most of the developers, they're not really in it to create something very utility driven. They just want to flip a token. That's a problem. So we need to be able to make the technology accessible to people that are in the field doing something and they see opportunities for these swarms to alleviate their, whatever their hardships in the world and create a swarm that is actually able to solve a problem. That's the first important principle. And that comes through a set of no-code tools. And I've used all of them. They're all very hard to use. You all need like you need like this, you need like a foundational knowledge about like LLMs, about prompt engineering, about all the different kinds of like ways you can vectorize and you can create databases, whether it's going to be like a vector search or whether it's going to be like a full search of all of the information and so on. It's like there's so many like things that you need to know, and it's going to take you at least like three, four, maybe like I guess like a week to get first of all familiar with the concept and then to be able to build that thing. So I think the product is going to speak for itself, and it's going to be able to get users in because it's just going to be so easy for you to build one of these things. That's the first thing. I believe that the product is going to market itself as a good product. Then secondly, the second principle is that we want to prove and we want to show that you can actually build really cool stuff with this. Hence, we are going to incubate and we're doing our own versions of swarms, right? So like the Rollup News is one, Truth Protocol Rollup News is one. Then we're going to work on like a DeFi swarm on SUI, but that's also going to be maybe a little bit more interoperable between other ecosystems where you can like shift assets around and it has some pre-built-in functionality for assessing market situations based off some widely known or widely used analysis models. And yeah, and then probably we'll work with the community on like 1, 2, maybe 3 more swarms. We have actually grants available for that. So we will be able to really incubate and like, like take people under our wing and say like, okay, you want to really build this thing. Here's the deal. You can use the tools. Here's tokens that will unlock based off like a schedule and milestones and so on. And you can build it out. And I think that is going to be the biggest marketing like tool for us, because if you have a product that's being used and then you realize, like developers or like the community realizes what it's built upon, like our framework, then that's just gonna become like, oh, okay, well, this works very well. That's really cool. They build it in like 2.5 weeks. Okay, I want to build something similar. I think that's like gonna be, yeah, that's gonna be true marketing, right? It's product marketing. It's not just like marketing, like we're gonna like shield with a bunch of influencers and they're gonna like spend a lot of money on this and that. Like, okay, is there longevity in that? For GTM, go to market, token launch is really important, obviously, but on the long term, you really have to rely eventually on your product.
Yeah. People always want to know this. Usually, folks aren't able to say much about this, but are we in any talks or already agreements with like any tier 1 exchanges and stuff for the token?
Yeah, we're literally in talks with all of the exchanges, like you name it, all of them. We have a very specific strategy, which I cannot share, but the strategy is going to become super apparent once we do go live. But I can tell you a little bit about the asset strategy in terms of sequencing. It's going to be main asset first and then swarm assets after. So main asset is going to launch. Utility is going to be mainly driven by the platform that it's going to be accompanied by, and then immediately there's going to be this utility flywheel where you want to go on the platform, you want to launch something, you will need some swarm. If you are not part of like the core community and you don't have agent licenses, then you probably still want to participate. You need to find somebody who has an agent license, and then you need to get like tokens for liquidity and so on and so on. So like, hence the sequencing for us makes a lot more sense that way.
Nice. Thanks. And then this question from a community would like to know if the team has any affiliation with Truth Seekers, protocol run by Lou from the last bull run. Seems to have an identity about truth seeker. I don't know if that rings a bell at all.
No, I actually don't know. But that's an interesting one. I can look into it, but we don't have an affiliation with them.
Okay.
There was also another, it's just a warning. There was somebody that took our profile picture and launched a SUI, like a truth blockchain or something like that. That's not us either. Like I saw some people asking the question whether that was us, but that's not us.
So I need to roll up news that then, right, and see that it's fake and
Yes.
not real.
Yes.
You know, I did use
Yes,
the roll up news.
exactly.
I did it my own thread on Sonic. It's a Solana gaming blockchain. So I did a thread and then I
Yeah.
tested roll up news on it, and yeah, it was really cool actually how much I learned too from just reading the roll up news report, like on what I
Yeah.
said. And like how many like links it puts to different articles or whatever else too. Then I was like, oh, actually didn't even know that. Like so that was
Yeah.
pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah. Is it possible to share my screen? I just want to show this roll up real quick.
Yeah, should be able to.
Should be?
I
Let's
think.
try.
Yeah, I think at the bottom there, are you able to present?
Yeah, I mean like does it show up on your recording thing?
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's great. All right. So yeah, this is, let me see.
Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
here we go. All right, so like this is the thread I was talking about,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
this guy is essentially talking about, he's taking a phrase, section 3, and then he's talking about it. He's giving like his verdict essentially from his perspective. And then I rolled it up and I was like, okay, we need them facts. And then seemingly he was really kind of like telling the truth about most of the things, but then there was this one thing that got refuted, right? So it's like, okay, here we're analyzing like the sections that he's talking about, and we can indeed see that it's true. Like he's saying that the order is accessible on the internet. That's also true. He says that the USDS, the United States Digital Services Agency, was repurposed as the United States Doge service by Trump, and that's all true, right? But then there's this one, and even though it's only one, it's a very important one, because he's saying by repurposing the USDC agency, Trump ensured that there was funding for Doge without having to fight with Congress and made it more legally sound. However, it's a claim, and there's no supporting evidence regarding the exact funding or the funding of this like USDC, and also whether it was actually um, to the extent of its funding and legal soundness, like it remains unclear. So that is like a politically loaded pitch within all of the facts, right? All of the things that he stated, and then you have this one thing in there which is really important because it's about the funding, right? But it's not really able to be verified right now. Actually, it's falsified. And then there's this one unsubstantiated thing where he claimed that there was like the Doge teams will be hired in every administrative branch of agency, consisting of a team lead, lawyer, HR person, and engineer. But that's also not, that's also not
Substantiated.
verified or unverified. Yeah,
Right. Right.
substantiated. So, like the way that we go about it then is like, okay, it's safe to read because the majority of claims is true, means that we can imagine that the intention of this author is legit, right? And like the emotional level is neutral. It's not like emotionally loaded. So, like it's just such a powerful thing from my perspective. It's like, okay, like I want to know what's up, and this is the way that in like one click I can actually have this presented to me.
Yeah, and so interesting what you kind of said there too, where if somebody's doing an article or saying all these facts, 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 just so that the one thing that they want to push, comes across as
Yeah.
like oh, all this other stuff is obviously very very true. This other thing
Yeah.
must be as well. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the way that the game is played, right? Like that's like, you know I was talking about this on this other AMA or podcast, I don't remember, but it's like you attribute credibility to a source based off their expertise, and then they talk about something which is unrelated to their expertise, and they sound very confident. Then you're like, okay, yeah, that's true, right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's not like those things are not related to each other. Somebody that's an expert in law doesn't mean they're also an expert in whatever, like baking cookies or some shit like that.
Right, right. And even when they are an expert in a certain field, sometimes you're like, are you really? Because,
How legit is
depending on what
that?
they
Yes.
say, or, or you have experts disagree on things all the time, in certain fields and stuff too. So, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
true.
I definitely really appreciate you coming on, chatting a bit, kind of going through all that stuff. Definitely really excited for Swarm and to kind of see everything continue to grow and yeah, just where we're gonna be. Definitely excited about everything that you're building. So
Thanks for having me, man.
yeah,
Really
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you. I think you're a cool guy. Your community is really cool, and I'm happy to have you guys join the Swarm family. That's for sure.
I hope you enjoyed that AMA with the CEO of Swarm. If you're still around, obviously you should be subscribing to my channel because you listen to this much of the video. As always, stay warm, Wookiees.